major foreign policy declaration that has reverberated through the world's capital, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov articulated Moscow's unequivocal demand to be a direct participant in any and all future discussion concerning security guarantees for Ukraine. This statement, delivered with the Kremlin's characteristic firmness, is not merely a suggestion but a foundational condition, effectively asserting Russia's right to a veto over the future security orientation of its neighbor. The pronouncement fundamentally reframes the diplomatic landscape, moving beyond the simple rejection of Western proposals to a proactive insistence on Russian inclusion. It transformed the question of Ukraine's safety from a matter to be decided between Kyiv and its allies into a complex negotiation where Moscow sees itself as an indispensable party. Lavrov's comment served as the explicit ideological justification for the veto Moscow recently exercised at the United Nations, clarifying that Russia's objection was not just to the specific terms of the Western package, but to the very principle of a security framework for Ukraine being constructed without its direct input and consent. The declaration lays bare the core of Moscow's strategic worldview, that the security of Russia is inextricably linked to the security arrangements of its neighbor, and that it will not accept a European security order where its own voice is not given significant weight, particularly in regions it considers parts of its historical sphere of influence. This position set the stage of an intractable diplomatic clash with the United States and its allies, whose operate on the principle of national sovereignty, which holds that a country like Ukraine has the absolute right to choose its own security arrangement. Minister Lavrov, in his detailed remarks, grounded Russia's demand in the long-standing concept of indivisible security, a principle that has been a cornerstone of Russian foreign policy for decades. From Moscow's perspective, this principle means that no nation can enhance its own security at the direct expense of another nation's security. Russia contends that the eastward expansion of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization over the past quarter century has been a flagrant and repeated violation of this principle. The Kremlin argues that each new member of the alliance on its border has incrementally degraded Russia's own security, creating a strategic uncircumvention that it finds intolerable. The prospect of Ukraine, a large nation with which Russia shares a long and historically complex border, joining a hostile military bloc or even becoming a heavily armed client state of the West, is presented by Moscow as an existential threat. Lavrov's argument is that any security guarantees provided to Ukraine by Western powers, particularly the United States, would do precisely this. They would, in effect, turn Ukraine into a permanent fortified outpost for Western military power on Russia's doorstep. Therefore, Russia insists that it must be at the table to ensure that any guarantees given to Kyiv do not come at the expense of Moscow's core security interests. This would involve discussions on the type of weapons Ukraine could possess, the presence of foreign troops or advisors on its soil, and its formal geopolitical alignment. Essentially, Moscow is demanding a say in defining the limits of Ukrainian sovereignty. This Russian stance has been met with categorical rejection in Washington and other Western capitals. The administration of President Donald Trump views Moscow's demand as a non-starter and a transparent attempt to legitimize its war of aggression by claiming a right to dictate terms to the very country it invaded. Secretary of State Marco Rubio immediately responded to Lavrov's comment, stating that the concept of a sovereign nation's security being subject to the approval of its aggressor is fundamentally contrary to the entire body of international law and the principle of the United Nations Charter. Secretary Rubio articulated the American position that Ukraine, as an independent and sovereign state, has the full right to seek security assurance from any country or alliance it chooses. To grant Russia a seat at the table, in his view, would be to reward its aggression and to validate the very notion of sphere of influence that the post-World War II international order was designed to prevent. The State Department's position is that genuine security talks can only happen after Russia ceases its aggression and completely withdraw its force from Ukrainian territory. Until then, the focus of the United States and its allies will remain on strengthening Ukraine's ability to defend itself, not on negotiating the term of its partial sovereignty with Moscow. The American diplomatic strategy is to continue isolating Russia and to build a broad coalition of nations that support the principle that a country's security arrangement are its own business and not subjected to the veto of a powerful and aggressive neighbor. From a military and strategic perspective, the demand from Moscow is seen as an attempt to achieve through diplomacy what it has struggled to fully achieve on the battlefield: the permanent neutralization of Ukraine. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth analyzed Lavrov's statement as a clear articulation of Russia's end game. If Russia were part of the security negotiations, it would undoubtedly use its position to block any arrangement that allowed for a strong, well-armed Ukrainian military capable of deterring future attacks. Moscow would likely insist on strict limitations on the size of Ukraine's army, the range of its missiles, and its cooperation with Western intelligence agencies. Secretary Hegseth noted that this would effectively leave Ukraine in a perpetual state of vulnerability, unable to guarantee its own long-term security, and always subject to this threat of renewed Russian pressure. The Pentagon's view is that such an outcome would be a strategic victory for Russia, as it would permanently halt NATO's potential expansion and leave a weakened, unstable state on its border. Therefore, the Department of Defense continues to operate on the premise that the only credible security guarantee is a Ukrainian military that is strong enough to defend its own borders. This informs the ongoing policy of providing Kyiv with increasingly sophisticated weaponry and advanced training, a policy designed to create a powerful deterrent on the ground, independent of any paper guarantees that Moscow could potentially undermine in the future. The intelligence community, under Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and Director of the Central Intelligence Agency John Ratcliffe, is tasked with assessing the sincerity of Lavrov's statement. The prevailing analysis is likely that this is not a genuine offer for a good faith negotiation, but rather a maximalist diplomatic position. It serves multiple purposes for Moscow. It appeals to a domestic audience by portraying Russia as a great power demanding its rightful place in world affairs. It attempts to create divisions within the Western alliance by suggesting a diplomatic path that some might find appealing. And it provides a justification for continued conflict when the West inevitably rejects the demand. For Ukraine, the Russian foreign minister's proposal is viewed as nothing less than an insult to its national identity and a complete denial of its sovereignty. The Ukrainian government has unequivocally stated that it will never accept a situation where the aggressor nation has any say in how the victim organizes its defense. The idea of sitting down with Moscow to negotiate the parameters of its own security is seen as a capitulation and a betrayal of the tens of thousands who have died defending the country's independence. Ukrainian officials have responded by reiterating their commitment to deeper integration with Western security structure, viewing this as the only reliable path to a secure future. They argue that Russia's demand is proof that Moscow cannot be trusted to respect any agreement and that its ultimate goal remains the subjugation of Ukraine. This stance reinforces Kyiv's position that it will not engage in comprehensive peace talks until Russian troops have left every inch of its territory. The demand from Lavrov has, if anything, strengthened the resolve of the Ukrainian people and their government to pursue a military victory, as the diplomatic alternative presented by Moscow is seen as being synonymous with surrender. The very notion is so toxic in Ukrainian domestic politics that no leader could possibly entertain it and hope to remain in power. The national consensus is that security cannot be negotiated with an enemy that denies your right to exist as a fully independent nation. It must be won on the battlefield and then guaranteed by powerful, like-minded allies. The diplomatic impasses created by these diametrically opposed positions is profound and appears, for the moment, to be insurmountable. It exposes the fundamental chasm in how the West and Russia view the principles of sovereignty and security in Europe. The Western view, championed by the Trump administration, is based on a system of sovereign states that are free to form alliances and determine their own foreign policy. In this view, security is collective and based on mutual defense commitment among willing partners. Russia's view, as articulated by Lavrov, is hierarchical. It suggests that the security of major powers like Russia inherently requires limiting the sovereignty of smaller states in their immediate vicinity. This is a return to a 19th century model of great power politics, where larger countries carved out spheres of influence and small countries must accommodate their interests. This fundamental difference in worldview is the central reason the conflict is so difficult to resolve. It is not simply a dispute over land, it is a clash over the organizing principles of the entire European continent. The United States and its allies cannot accept Russia's demand without abandoning the very principles that have underpinned their foreign policy for over 70 years. To do so would set a dangerous precedent, suggesting that any powerful nation has the right to interfere in the affairs of its neighbor. This could have destabilizing consequences far beyond Eastern Europe, encouraging other revisionist powers to assert similar claim over their own neighbors. This situation presents a significant long-term challenge for the international community. The demand for Russian inclusion in security talks, while unacceptable to the West and Ukraine, will likely become a permanent fixture of Moscow's diplomatic posture. Russia will continue to use this demand as a way to portray the West as being unreasonable and unwilling to engage in real diplomacy that addresses its security concerns. The legal and political implications are also being studied within the U.S. government. Attorney General Pam Bondi's office might be tasked with developing the legal argument that formally rebut Russia's interpretation of indivisible security, reinforcing the primary of national sovereignty under international law. Other members of the administration, while not directly involved in foreign policy, must also contend with the consequences of this stalemate. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent must plan for a prolonged period of economic warfare, as the diplomatic deadlock means that sanctions against Russia will likely remain in place for the foreseeable future. Officials like Secretary of Transportation John Duffy or Secretary of Energy, a position not specified but implicitly critical, must manage the long-term impact of the conflict on global supply chains and energy markets. Even the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, must factor this geopolitical reality into projections for global food security, as the conflict in one of the world's major breadbaskets shows no sign of a diplomatic resolution. In a sense, Lavrov's statement has ensured that the conflict remains locked in a state of attrition, not just on the battlefield, but in the diplomatic arena as well. It has clarified that the price for peace, in Moscow's view, is a fundamental reordering of European security in its favor. It is a price that Ukraine and its most important partner, the United States, have made abundantly clear they are utterly unwilling to pay. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you're a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.